There you go. Good. Keep talking to those vendors. You know, Rick, I don't know if you have a need for their services, but you're learning, apartment buildings and other community things that they do. So maybe you have a connection. Maybe you're a church. Maybe you're.
Unfortunately, I hope we don't. Well, we were a township, but we're struggling with budget situations, and some days, you know how it is. It's more the budget, and sometimes we cut that.
Right.
Services like that might have to be the alternative. We have to having
Exactly.
more staff and benefits and all those kinds of things.
Good. So
I
you
hope
never.
we don't, but it's nice to know that that's an available resource.
Yep. You never know. All right, so our next speakers are with ADP Total Source. ADP Total Source is a company that actually Lakeview Cemetery has been using for about 6-7 years, somewhere around in there. It is a professional employer organization. They're going to be talking about PEOs and kind of what services they can offer. Human Resources is no longer the department that handles tactical employee paperwork, but now provides the opportunity to sit at the executive table and drive HR strategies that support the overall goals and initiatives of the business. The war for talent is real and affecting employers of all sizes. ACA and employee health care is a top concern for most business owners. Compliance, remaining up to date on new regulations and changes that directly impact your business. The challenges owners face today while running a business and the inability to address the trends in human capital management have led to tremendous growth in the PEO industry. Hopefully we're going to learn more about the PEO organizations and the true benefits in a co-employment relationship. I want to welcome Mike Well, Phil Thompson, and Nick Stepanovich. Here we go.
Well, thank you very much, Marilyn. So my name is Phil Thompson. I'm the Regional Sales Director here in Ohio for our PEO solution. There's a couple different flavors, and we're not going to go into ADP specific stuff today, but more educate you. As you mentioned, war on talent. HR is constantly evolving. I'm guessing anyone think about HR on a daily basis. That's the same with most people that we meet with, and it's what's interesting about human resources is a lot of people think of it as we're going to plan the birthday celebration, got to get people paid, provide some benefits maybe, but HR has become really an extremely critical piece as the unemployment rate's at an all-time low, so people are looking for top talent for their industry, and it's not necessarily just readily available. Combine that with the government is asking more and more of businesses of all sizes, and with that comes challenges, pain points, and having to reshift the way you either are approaching your business or ultimately protecting that. So what the HR world is today is really evolving into human capital management. That's what we say every single day is human capital management, and it's your people are your most expensive asset as it relates to kind of the day-to-day operations. Maybe not if you own too much property, but that piece is extremely influential in how good of an organization you are. And while they can be a huge challenge from a burden perspective, they also are making you look good and helping drive the business forward. So kind of talk about that today. I'm going to turn over to Mike. Mike is he's our expert. So in some of these solutions that we're going to talk about, you get a Mike caliber individual. And he's going to share with you kind of the lay of the land and what's going on with ACA, or maybe going away with ACA, and what the new Trump Care, American Care Act, or whatever they're calling it, Health Care Act is today. But I'm going to turn over to Mike, and then we're going to share with you kind of different ways that you can look at HR in-house, outsourcing, and then how would you outsource, and then talk to you a little bit about PEO, how that works, maybe some of the advantages we've partnered with the Maryland and Lakeview Cemetery on over the last 5-6 years. So thanks for your attention in advance.
Thank you. Let's see if this works. Look at that. Sweet. Okay. So we're going to talk about a lot of the things that Phil just said. Some of the, I want to focus on you guys though, because who in here, just show of hands, who in here has employees? Right? The employment world is evolving quickly. And I think a lot of us came out of the world where, you know, hey, this employee, come here, do this, they do it, done. That's gone, okay? People bring different needs, wants, and expectations to work with them, and it's impacting how a business operates. It's impacting a business's profitability. It's impacting the business's ability to get stuff done. It's impacting things like retention, which is a bottom line issue. It's impacting things like what employees expect when they come to work for you. Our attorneys make us put this in here. This is not legal advice. I usually would say this is like, don't take anything we tell you seriously slide, but you know, we try to cover the high points. We will be talking about some things that are current in terms of legislation that is active, bring up the data on that, but we're not here to talk about, you know, good or bad or you know, give you opinions. We're just going to talk about what it looks like. So, let me ask you a question. When you think about people issues, people challenges, people opportunities, what are you facing? What are some things that are going on in your world with managing your workforce?
People you hire represent your business.
People you hire represent your business. And their relative ability to do that, good or bad, impacts customer retention, impacts your bottom line. What else? What else are you facing out there?
Productivity of employees.
Productivity of employees is, that's kind of a multifaceted thing. So people show up every day for work. They look at themselves in the mirror when they go into work. Who does performance ratings? Performance evaluations of your people. The class of 1 to 5 scale, right? You guys, I saw one hand. Only one of you guys? Only one of you does performance evaluations on your folks? One? Let me try that question again. Who does performance evaluations? No, nobody. Whoever has had a performance evaluation done on them? Anybody? Okay. It was probably the classic 1 through 5 scale, right? 5 being you're a rock star, 1 meaning, let me help you find something else to do with your life, right? And I bet you that every single one of your employees gets up in the morning, looks themselves in the mirror and says, my God, today when I get to work, I'm going to be a 3. I aspire to be a 3. How does that impact your productivity if an employee shows up every day and says, I'm only going to be a 3 today. I'm only going to do what's expected, nothing more, nothing less.
Better than 1.
Could have been a 1. If I'm a 3, what's the face of the business that the customer is seeing? If I'm just a 3 when I show up for work, what does that look like? Mediocre, right? And when you guys go out and you conduct your interviews, do you ask as an interview question, are you a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? Right? When you show up for work to me every day, are you going to be a 3, a 5, or 4? What is the employee, if you ask them a question like that, tell me about your work performance. How do they answer that question? They always tell you what? They love me. Wherever I work, they love me. Anybody ever had to fire anybody? You've been added that. So you know that finding, attracting, and retaining talent, productive talent, is a huge opportunity, right? What else? Any other challenges you guys face? Yeah.
We're having a tough time now just finding entry-level employees, quality entry-level employees.
Describe just roughly what kind of job we're talking about.
We're talking about, so entry-level, it would be on our mowing and string trimming team. We need to have about 18 or so. It's a seasonal position. We increased the starting pay to much more than when I started 20 years ago. So the starting pay we feel is comparable to other starting pays. It's certainly more, it pays more than an entry-level position at McDonald's or a fast food restaurant. So we're having trouble just finding folks for that.
Okay. And you've done some good market analysis to know what other employers pay,
Yes.
not only in your business, but in other businesses that hire comparable skills.
Correct.
Okay, good. And you're getting, since you've increased your pay, you're getting much more productivity for that dollar spent, correct? Well, not so much. I didn't get an enthusiastic yes. Sometimes. Look, hiring people comes with its own set of challenges. And we're working in an environment today that keeps challenges on top of some of those challenges sometimes. So how do you manage that? What are some of those challenges? Well, we were just talking about this morning. It seems like every time there's an election, there's a new agenda, right? Every time we have a new face in the White House, there's a new agenda. We just went through this with, in our business. We spent billions, probably, aligning our business to service the needs of employers under the last administration. What was the number one runaway with a bullet, big, huge thing that we probably had to do to invest in to service our clients? To comply with what? The Affordable Care Act. It was huge. And it wasn't just offering benefits, right? It was reporting, it was tax stuff, it was overall compliance and guidance. There were little booby traps and landmines out there for employers just for offering coverage that most employers didn't know about. Well, now we've gone through that. There was some cyclicality in our business and some things we had to do to manage through that. I'm sure you did too. And now we've invested in that, we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort in that, and then boom, course change. Right? That's really hard sometimes to keep up with. What are some things that are on that agenda? Well, one thing, the executive order regulatory freeze. We know 100% exactly what that means. No, we do not. We have some inklings of what that means. That means that some regulations that we thought were going to roll will probably be delayed, changed, stalled. One big reg that impacts, I think, most of you, if not all of you, was going to hit December 1st. You know what that was? Anybody know what that was?
Pay to the salaried employees.
Yeah, giving them overtime. Who could be exempt, not exempt, who could be salaried or hourly? There was a whole set of regulations existing around that have been around since I think the 30s or certainly the FDR administration. And this was going to be effective December 1st, 2016, the biggest overhaul of it. What did I do? Class. I shouldn't do that. This could be the biggest overhaul of those regulations since they were initially rolled out in the 30s. Yet, we had a lot of clients gear up for that. Like a lot of clients knew that was coming, knew that they had exempt employees who they would have to reduce to hourly or vice versa. And they did it, they prepared for it, and then boom, stopped, right? Because the judge down in Texas said, well, wait, we want to look at this a little more. And then a regulatory freeze stopped some more of those types of regulations from rolling. Health insurance administration and costs will be impacted by what's happening right now. We'll talk more about that in a little while. There's some smoke about prospects for paid maternity leave. On one hand, we have a regulatory freeze, and on the other hand, there is some momentum building for rolling out new regulations or legislation on paid maternity leave. Nationwide use of E-Verify. What the heck is E-Verify? Anybody know? What's E-Verify? Anybody ever use it?
That's that 9-page form you hand out to new employees, isn't it?
That's an I-9,
No,
right?
yes.
It's the kissing cousin to this, absolutely. E-Verify is a government database that employers have access to where you can check and verify whether or not the individual that you are hiring matches with the name and the social security number that's in the IRS database. Okay. There's a problem with that. A couple of problems from the employer's perspective is that, one, even if you go through the trouble of having to do E-Verify and going through that process, you still got to do the I-9. You still got to do the I-9. That's not it. you still have to complete an I-9, right? So the mandatory use today of E-Verify, and it is mandatory in a number of states, not Ohio. Anybody here a government contractor? Government entity? Something, I think it's probably a government entity, right? Okay. There are some mandatory requirements to use E-Verify for certain government entities or contractors. So this is something that employers will be watching. And there's a whole lot of discussion about who should be working for you, who should not, under what circumstances, if they are not currently citizens, right? That's just in the news all over the place. So there'll be, anybody here hire individuals on visas? So if you have that experience, some of those regs could impact you. That's challenge number one. Challenge number two, and boy, was this something we just heard, right? Attracting and retaining the best talent. And we heard Phil said, look, unemployment, that number is sitting at around 4.7% right now. Just a few years ago, what was that number? Anybody remember? What was at its high point in 2009? What did we get to nationally? It was about 9, right? A little over 9. In some states, like should I say this out loud that I'm from Michigan? In Michigan, it was worse. Michigan, we cranked up closer to 10. So what was it like hiring when unemployment was 9 and 10%? Some employers found it a lot easier versus where some of you are today, hiring entry-level workers where things are a little bit tighter and tougher, and you're investing more in your wages and not necessarily getting the return on that investment in all cases, right? So in return, since we're having a tightening labor market, wage growth has been 2% roughly since 2009. Now we're looking at, and these are average numbers, right? 3% nationally, which means in some markets, it's going to be heated up more than that. In some markets, man, thankfully, is anybody here from Washington originally? The west side of the state? You know what's happening out there with wages in Washington? How'd you like to live in a world where minimum wage is going to $15 an hour, roughly? How would that impact you? Hiring entry-level workers when the minimum wage for everybody is $15 an hour, right? And you're trying to hire against 4.7% unemployment. That makes your job tough. 87% of employers in a recent survey said, look, I need to hold on to what I got. I need to figure out a way that once I get them here, I keep them. Because turnover is a killer. Turnover is it's a manufacturing center within your organization of additional costs, right? It produces overtime. It produces additional training expense. It produces a drag on productivity, right? So employers said, look, if I can hold on to what I got, if I can hold on to my employees, that's one of the best ways to address 4.7% unemployment. But how the heck do I do that? So in order to consider, one of the things we talk about considering and attract strategy for retaining folks, certainly some of you have looked at compensation. That's not the only piece. There are other factors in creating a work environment where people want to work. There are other factors in creating an environment where people, when they come there, they want to stay. And there are things like learning opportunities, flexible work arrangements, career mobility, and transitional opportunities that could help make your workplace more attractive and make you an employer of choice. Any questions about this slide? All right. You wouldn't think about this necessarily being number one with a bullet or even close to number one with a bullet when we're talking about how do I be a better employer. But when you stop to think about the data that you're holding onto as an employer, and you start talking about the data that you sometimes collect from your employees in that process, not just on them, but also their family members sometimes, And then you start talking about, well, how do I retain that data? How do I store it? How do I manage it? How do I protect it? And how do I keep it from being accessed or stolen or used in a way that I don't want it to be used? That's one angle. And in order to reduce your liability, many states will say, look, Mr. Employer, you better have a statement somewhere in your organization, which is a handbook or post it up on the wall or whatever, that says that employers have a duty and you're going to take proactive action to protect that data. Okay? And you have policies that tell employees how to do it, that are specific to your organization. If you're not an organization that has a lot of data on computers or available on a network, you don't have necessarily the electronic data risk, but paper and the data on it can certainly create a risk as well. That's why there are companies out there right now that are making big bucks coming around and picking up your paper and shredding. Because that paper can also create a security risk. And a lot of employers store their employee data still on paper. Consider strategies that help you protect and retain that employee data. When we start talking about, using companies, like ADP, one of the things that ADP is absolutely insane about, and these guys can tell you probably stories about this as well. The things that my company does to protect me from myself, right? From accidentally releasing data are crazy, right? We carry laptops. I have a hard time sometimes remembering how to get into my laptop because the passwords change constantly. My entire hard drive is encrypted. I've got, they just installed this new sort of applet or addition to our email. If any email that I'm sending is going outside of ADP, this little program comes up and says, stop, wait, before you send this, first of all, check the boxes here so that you're telling us for sure that you know who this email is going to, number one, and number two, make sure that any attachments that are in there, check this attachment if it's on your email, so you're telling us that there's nothing in this attachment that is not secure. Why would ADP go crazy with this? Because if any of you are our clients, you could destroy us legally if we screwed up and let loose some of your data. Don't get any ideas. Seriously, that is a huge risk for us in this business. But it's not just a risk for us, it's a risk for you. Okay, so one value add here certainly, well, beyond all of the other stuff that we do, is give you a way to secure some of that data. Give it to us. Managing a diverse workforce. This is so weird. But, when you think about it, it makes sense. You guys have all heard the terms Generation X, Millennials, right? You guys have heard those terms. And, some of us, kind of think, well, okay, there's cute terms for describing people of different generations. But there's more to it than that. Because there's some research done. And there's actually been quite a bit of research done. Folks at Farley Dickinson University gave us this nice little chart. And I'm sure all the folks in the back row, can you read this? Can you read this line right here? You in the back row? Can you tell what that is? Just kidding. It's probably hard to read. But what this is a chart that says, look, if you are born between 1922 and 1945, you're sort of that veteran generation, you thrive in a different leadership style, you interact differently with people, you communicate differently with people, you take feedback from your supervisor differently or seek different feedback from your supervisor, your way to message and communicate within the organization is different than the Generation Y person who was born up through year 2000, between 81 and 2000. All of those little data points here that were collected and to put this chart together tell you as an employee, wait a minute, just because the communication style that you use is cool for you doesn't mean it's cool for the person you just hired. And the person you just hired, who's trying to communicate with one of your veteran employees, better think about how that interaction works if they want that communication to be effective. That all may sound kind of esoteric, but when we flip back a couple slides, and we talked about how 87% of employers said attracting and retaining talent is a huge driver for them, this had better be on your radar. How people thrive in the workplace generationally is very different. So in your retention strategy, having this as a cornerstone, I think, is extremely valuable. And of course, working with service providers who bring some of those components to your retention strategy is helpful. We continue, for example, to add content and communication pathways to our website that our clients' employees have access to. And not just our website. Who in this room has, I see it on the desktops here for some of you, who's got one of these? Smartphone? Just about everybody, right? Who doesn't go anywhere anymore without one of these? Anybody have 20-some-year-old kids? Okay, those of you who do, can you get them sometimes to look up from this when you want to speak to them? It's a challenge, right? That's how this generation over here is coming into your workplace right now. They are using that tool as a cornerstone of how they want to operate. Okay, just an example, right? If you're still flinging paper memos out to these new employees that you're bringing in, and you're not getting their attention at all, now you know why. They don't care about paper memos. They want it delivered to them in their smartphone. Okay? So helping you do that is one of the things that ADP and other companies like this can bring to the table. Okay, so this is a hot button topic. I believe tomorrow they may vote in the House, they're trying to get it scheduled, to vote in the House on something called the American Healthcare Reform Act. The target of the American Healthcare Reform Act is to essentially strip out the enforcement components of the ACA. That's like job number one. Until that happens, and the American Healthcare Reform Act is by no means guaranteed to go flying through the House and Senate on its way to the President's desk for signature, right? Right now, it's just a bill on Capitol Hill. So, until that legislation is signed, the ACA is still the law of the land. If you are an employer above 50, you're still required to offer coverage to your full-time employees. Even if you're not an employer above 50, you're still required to offer coverage that, if you do offer coverage, I should say, it still needs to meet certain requirements. If you offer coverage, you still have to communicate with your employees about that coverage a certain way. So it's not just a law that impacts the 50 and above crowd. It impacts any employees. And it is still the law of the land. So, not much that we can do to give you great updates here on what's happening, other than to say, generally, from a sort of directional standpoint, if the current administration is successful, these are sort of the cornerstones of what they are trying to do. So job one, right, would be to strip out the enforcement components of the ACA. What you're hearing is that the legislative agenda for the administration around healthcare reform is going to take place in 3 phases. So this is the first phase. They have to kind of get the current enforcement mechanisms of healthcare reform out of the way, or the ACA out of the way, before they can enact their agenda. So the major components are individual mandate and employer mandates go to 0. They can't repeal. So the logic here is apparently that they don't believe they can actually outright appeal the ACA. But what they can do is strip out the enforcement components, one of which is the employer mandate. And for employers, anybody here in the 50 and above crowd? Got a few of you? If you are in the 50 and above crowd, what that would mean for you is that if this passes retroactive to 2016, you will not generate penalties for not offering your employees affordable minimum value coverage. But until it passes, it's still a long land. So who's in the 50 and above club again? That one there, one of the few. Did you all get your ACA tax reporting out the door yet? Guys, ladies and gentlemen, did you get your ACA tax reporting out the door yet? Okay, well, today's the 21st of March. It needs to be to the IRS by the end of the month, and you need to have it in your employees' hands by the end of last month, so just saying. Replaces subsidies with tax credits. Is this a big deal? I don't know. A lot of people seem to think that there are some advantages here, there's some disadvantages here, but conceptually, what's the difference between a subsidy and a tax credit? Anybody answer that question? What's the difference between a subsidy and a tax credit? This is weird stuff.
The subsidy could be exceptionally higher, because I think it could be on tax credit.
Could be.
You get somebody who's 65 years old, only make $12,000, you get a huge amount of subsidy, there's not going to be much of a tax credit, at least the way that's used.
Yeah, could be. So there are scenarios where a subsidy could be richer than a tax credit, for sure. However, under the ACA structure, subsidies were only available through what? If you bought coverage on the marketplace, at the exchange.
Good place to buy it.
Well, you could buy it from a broker. You could buy it direct from the carrier. You just wouldn't be, if you didn't buy it in exchange, you wouldn't get the subsidy. So some of the carriers' participation in subsidies in some markets has diminished. So here's the good and the bad of this. Where subsidies might be richer, on one hand, that's an advantage. On the other hand, availability of carriers or carrier choice has been an issue. For tax credits, you don't have to go to the exchange to get the tax credit. It is a monthly, it's a monthly piece that will come at you as funding to go buy insurance. However, it may not be as rich as the subsidy. So pluses and minuses here. Anybody here offer plans with health savings accounts? High deductible plans, health savings accounts. Some of you, yeah, some of you do. This would allow individuals to essentially double what they can put away in health savings accounts. Cadillac tax delayed. Cadillac tax was an excise tax on higher premium plans. Terribly unpopular on both sides of the aisle in Congress, so it was essentially kicked down the road. It's actually delayed now until 2020 under the current program, but now this was delayed to 2025. Retains provisions that folks generally like keeping your kids on your plan through 26 and pre-existing conditions and things like that.
I got a question about that.
Sure.
Till age 26, does that mean on their 26th birthday they have to go off, or do they stay on the remainder of that year?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the carrier. The law isn't as specific as you think on that, so there's some latitude given to the carrier. Generally what happens is, kid hits their 26th birthday, it takes the carrier a while to figure it out. And then the carrier goes back periodically, audits, and then sends a notice. So generally speaking, it's at some point after the kid's 26th birthday, in reality, right, at some point after the 26th birthday, the insurance coverage ends. Other questions about this? Okay. Gentlemen, I'm going to turn it over to you. Any other questions about any of the slides we just covered? Okay. Pick the one, sir.
Pick the one. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the ACA stuff because we already talked about a little bit of it. I can tell you that when I first found out about the ACA, it was this big, and I had the pleasure of being one of the people in my office in Chicago to read it. It was actually kind of a great thing from a sales perspective at that point in my career, because I could call everybody in the whole city of Chicago and say, by the way, I read the Affordable Care Act, unlike your representatives, I read it. Here's what it says. Freaked everybody the hell out. And then about 3 months into it, it got to be this big, and then this big, and then I couldn't even keep up. And then we had partners internally who wouldn't help us out with it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the ACA just because it's in a little bit of a limbo position as far as what's going to be moving forward. These are some of the regulations that are in place right now that you should be, and it's kind of a tricky spot because you have to move forward as if it's going to be the law of the land forever. And then at the very, very last minute, you could have to make a quick U-turn. So there's a little bit of a frustration that a lot of, not just our clients, but businesses that we interact with see. So this is the law of the land. This is what's in effect now. We can get you copies of this if you really want to see it. I'm going to skip over this part. And then here's some things that are still to come. So there's some changes around self-insured plans that you're going to, anybody here self-insured? You guys are? Okay. So there are some changes coming around the horn for that one. There are 2 tests as far as eligibility and benefits tests that are still coming. And then obviously some proposed rule changes. So these are still to come. I'm not asking you to talk to me about it necessarily because I have this on my business card. I'm just telling you this more from an information perspective. If you have somebody in your life that you trust who's a benefits administrator, who is a broker, I would definitely be having regular conversations with them about what is coming and what the due dates are and what's going to happen, okay? Because at some point, the buck has to stop somewhere with somebody in your company where they said, we're going to do this or we're not going to do this, and somebody's going to be accountable, right? So like you need to have somebody that you trust in your organization who can tell you, do this or don't do this. We stop short of telling you what to do or not to do because it goes back to the first slide, which is we're not giving you legal advice because we don't want to frankly be on the hook for it. But what I want to talk about more specifically is human capital management. We kind of give you broad strokes of the state of HR. This is sort of the part of the presentation where we tell you, you can kind of take it or leave it. Like you don't have to believe us that this is what's happening in HR, and you don't have to believe us that this is what's happening with your people, but it is, right? Like there's just some things that are facts. Some of them are alternative facts. A couple guys laugh, thanks. That's as much political as I want to give with you guys. But there's trends happening in HR. And the thing is, if you think about maybe going back to high school and you think about your American civics class and you're sitting there and you got some weirdo teacher standing in front of you. And there's that gal in the front of the class who knew all the answers and she was the rock star student. You guys can remember her? She has a job somewhere and she's probably doing very well in life. There's also the guy in the back of the classroom who was probably drinking his dad's stolen vodka at lunch in his car. He also has a job somewhere. Like those are some realities of employment. Like both of those people are grown-ups and both of them are probably working somewhere. So the question is not so much whether there's good employees and bad employees because they're both out there. The question is, why the heck would a good employee work for you? Like that's basically what it boils down to. So when we talk about human capital management and the impact your employees have on producing payroll, tracking time and attendance, benefits administration, the IT systems you need to manage your employees, the finance components of affording your employees, right? Affording the management of your employees, the tax ramifications of having an employee, the legal ramifications of having an employee. These are all things that we have to deal with because we've chosen to be employers. So if we're going to accept this reality and we want to win and do well, we have to kind of accept that the things that we've been talking about are probably true. Otherwise, if you say, no, these guys are crazy, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, a year from now when you're still struggling to find good people or you're losing the war for talent, it's not that you're a bad person. good people just don't want to work for you because you haven't communicated that you're a great employer or you're not offering what's relevant to them. Does that make sense? It doesn't make you a bad person. You're just choosing not to accept what's available. So, if you're going to accept everything we said, with even as being relatively true, and you decide that you want to get some assistance with it. I think you made a comment about you employ people, but at some point you might have to outsource the service of landscaping, right? So you guys might have people in-house who help you. You might have outsourcing vendors already. However you do it is okay. I'm not here to talk about what we do. I'm here to talk about the market options. So if you're standing here and you're thinking to yourself, having people kind of sucks. Like profit is good, people are not. I have to accept it. If I want profit, I need to have people. Sort of like, that's just sort of one of those dichotomous realities of being a business owner or being in charge. So if I'm going to accept the reality that people are frustrating and that there's 4 generations in the workforce and there's a lot of competition and unemployment is low and there's been a consumerization of employment going on right now where it used to be very paternalistic, like this is kind of how I talk to my kids. Are you ready? If you don't like it, move out. Oh, you don't like it here? Get a job. Go buy your own house, buy your own food, and then you can complain that dinner sucks. Like, I mean, does anybody have kids? Anybody ever said these types of things to their kids?
Not out loud.
Maybe not out loud. But that's the way, as employers, we've been for a long time. Oh, you don't like it here? Hit the bricks. You should be lucky to have a job here. Man, when I was a kid, I had 3 jobs to make ends meet. I'm paying you a fair wage. You should appreciate what you got. Even if we don't say it to them, our body language says it. But with unemployment in that 3 to 4 range, with social media where everybody's plugged in telling everybody how good and bad their job is, right? There's a consumerization of employment going around where now the people that you're hiring have the same power that they have as retail consumers, where they can walk past 7 options and buy another product on the shelf. Right? Think about how aggressive and cutthroat and tight retail is. That is happening to the employment process. So if you want help, or you want to do it well, you have 4 options. The world gives you 4 options, not ADP. The world gives you 4 options. You can do it in-house. You can do all your HR administration, and you can tackle your people strategy in-house. And then you can handle all the reporting and outbound money movement on your own, or with some vendors that will help you do that, right? Like banking. You can do traditional outsourcing, where your people still do all the heavy lifting. You just use a vendor's technology for it. So a payroll company is your calculator to calculate taxes and move the banking, but you still have an employee inter-payroll. Maybe you have a vendor that gives you technology so you can track HR information, but you still have HR people on staff doing HR, right? Maybe somebody's helping you with technology to administer benefits and communicate with carriers, but you still have a human being on staff who's administering benefits, right? That's classic outsourcing. So that's another option that you have, that if you haven't looked at, you should probably look at, because in the last 3 years, the entire industry has been turned upside down in sort of an arms race around technology and cost. Then, about 10 years ago, clients started looking for more, and the business process outsourcing got introduced into this industry. Business process outsourcing is not new. It's been around in finance, Big 4 consulting. It's about the idea of building a workflow and a process around going from point A to point B, standardizing it, and then handing it to somebody else to do for you so you can go do something else more valuable. Right? The apartment services company would be an example of business process outsourcing around maintaining properties. Right? Let us manage all of this for you. We can do it better, faster, cheaper, and you can go back to doing what your core competency is. Okay? So business process outsourcing is the 3rd option the market presents to you, which is you can partner with a vendor, and then you can take big pieces of this HR admin monster, and you standardize it, and you just hand it to them. And they do it for you, because they can do it at a transactional cost of less than you can do. The 4th option the world provides you, which is what these guys primarily work in, and I work in a little bit as well, is PEO, professional employee outsourcing, right? It's a co-employment model where your vendor actually has skin in the game with you as far as risk and liability. So this is not an ADP commercial. These are your 4 options in the world. If you're not entertaining these or regularly shopping them, or you haven't explored them as a way to accept and tackle the realities of HR today, I would put that on your list of things to do. It's just a general best practice. If you haven't visited these as options, and it doesn't have to be with us. It can be with whatever vendors you prefer, you should probably visit these. Does it make sense? Yes? Okay. So we internally call this the risk continuum. Because as you move to the right and you add services, your risk goes way down. Here, you own all the risk because you're doing it all yourself, and maybe a vendor helps you move data. They help you report to the government or do banking, right? Money movement. Here, the company, your vendor is actually helping you with record storage and calculations. So they have a little bit more skin in the game, but you still own the responsibility for putting good data in and using it correctly. Here, you have much less exposure because somebody says, we're going to do it for you. And here, we're going to co-employ your employees with you, so you have the least risk. So we call it the risk continuum. Because as you go to the right, your risk drops precipitously. Now, your invoice cost with whatever vendors you partner with goes up inversely, right? So you're going to pay the most here in a pure invoice perspective. And you're going to pay the least here in a pure invoice perspective. So your controllers like this, because they can't get their face out of an invoice. Your CFOs typically like this, because it's more strategy around total cost of ownership. A couple people laugh, so hopefully they're not the controllers. So when you're looking through your options, not only do you have these 4, this can't be an HR decision, and it shouldn't be just an owner decision. Finance, IT, operations, all these people should be involved in this decision because you need to decide what should my total cost of ownership look like with respect to my tolerance for risk. Fair? And if you have a vendor in any one of these categories today, and that vendor can't do 2, 3, or 4 of these, then when you do evaluate, you need to invite other vendors to the table. Because if you only sell hammers, every problem looks like a nail, right? So if I'm a sales guy, and I only have this in my bag, I'm going to tell you why this is the best product in the world for you. Which means you need to find other people representing other companies who also sell this or this, or find somebody who does all of them, because then you can at least feel like you're getting a little bit more of a fair shake. Right? Like, I have 4 kids. I do not go to car lots to shop for cars where they only have coupes and convertibles. I do not need somebody telling me why I'm going to look awesome in a 2-door sports car. I need somebody who can tell me that my wife is going to look great in a sports car, but we should probably have this Suburban so I can get to soccer games. Right? Like, you need to have people with variety in life who can give you a fair shake. Does this make sense to you guys? Like, if you leave with nothing else today, the HR landscape is changing. What you think is HR, which is the old personnel office and reporting, is changing. HR has become human capital management, like it or not. Consumerization of employment has taken place, which is why even when you pay people more, you think you're a great place to work, people don't get it, right? Because there's a marketing component to getting the word out there, right? You're not just competing for employees, you have to compete through all the white noise of life to get to your employees. And these are the 4 options the world presents to you. Any questions about this? No. I have the easiest part of the day. I just get to tell you what is, regardless of whether you like it or not. It's kind of the refreshing part of the meeting. And then I'll let Phil kind of like bring us home here a little bit with an explanation specifically of what those different options could mean to you, should you want to look at those as options for your organization.
Yeah. Good? Yeah. So building upon, we've kind of eliminated the in-house piece in a sense, right? It's you doing it, you having people that do it, you build your own systems, or you track it on paper. When you take the next step in that HR risk continuum, there's technology. That's a payroll provider, it's an IT company, but in the HR world, it's, there can be technology that tracks your HR forms, process payroll online, updates. Maybe we'll push hey, this is what's going on in the world. Here's what the Affordable Care Act is today. Here's what it might mean. Go read some more about it, but hey, it's coming. So it's still on you. There's great technology out there. There's a new Silicon Valley company popping up every day that can provide great technology to streamline the approach. Continuing on, you look at BPO or business process outsourcing. The big difference there is they have all those things that technology has. The technology is awesome. It also layers in a people component. So it gives you that point of contact, and they'll actually do more things for you as it relates to the automation streamlining. But it gives you that layer of expertise. So you're talking about outsourcing potentially in the future if budget's somewhere. Budget's always a conversation, right? It's what is the ROI for doing something like this? But if you could eliminate a payroll person or the payroll department and have it automated and let someone else who's got the expertise to do that for you, or 99% of it for you, that may make sense for you. One more step up is the co-employment piece. So, anyone ever heard of PEO, co-employment? No, Maryland has. So, it's been around since the 90s. Ohio is, I'm not a big fashionista, but I compare it to like New York and LA. They get fashion 5, maybe 10 years earlier sometimes than when the trends get to Ohio for the most part. It's kind of what co-employment is. It's been around forever. It's an outsourcing concept that isn't as widely known. So maybe out of 10 companies we meet with, 3 maybe have even heard of what it is. But the advantage there is again, maybe the invoice cost goes up, but there's a shared liability. So when you're co-employing, there's more things that we're going to actually be doing for you and taking that burden on. There's advantages. The big one is with benefits. So co-employment, what happens is, just so for your knowledge around that piece of it, it's really one of our most fastest growing divisions within our company, and really in the business world, and it's allowing companies to say, you get this payroll and tax liability, and all the exposure that goes in with that challenge of having employees, and we're going to push it over to this organization, they're going to share in that risk. So we're not coming in to do your job. We don't know how to run your organization better than you do. What we're really good at is the HR component. So we're going to give you our expertise. You're going to tap into our size and our buying power, allow you to operate like you're a much larger employer while still maintaining the small, medium-sized business culture that you've developed. But we're going to share that liability. So co-employment, I had a company a couple weeks ago say, well, what if I have $1 billion invention? Do you guys share the profits of that? No. We're just a vehicle for you to pay your people a different way and get rid of some of that liability you don't want to have. You're considered in the definition, the worksite employer is, you're who you hire, who you fire, you pay your people, keep running business as you always have. The PEO or co-employer becomes the employer of record. So your employees are paid under that PEO's one of their federal IDs, which initiates that shift in liability. So now, like today, every dollar that goes out, there's a liability associated with that with payroll and tax. If you file your taxes wrong, you aren't doing them, withholding properly, that's on you. In this relationship, it's on the PEO. So that's where the co-employment relationship comes in and is a huge advantage. Some of the great things about this is you have access to Fortune 100 benefits. And depending on who you partner with, there's maybe a better or less benefit when it comes to that buying power. But that's a huge piece. That's the number one reason people want to partner with us. If you're offering benefits, everyone knows the cost, and regardless of what regulations are there, people are going to McDonald's, people are going to the doctor, they're getting prescription drugs because they're sick. That piece is kind of the constant. There's a cost associated with getting sick, and it hits the employer a lot. So there's buying power when it comes to that piece of it, because you're accessing a larger organization's buying power. that shift in liability is huge. So there's, you think about, does anyone carry employment practices liability insurance, EPLI? That you may have it, if you don't, you're not shaking your head, you may have it in an umbrella policy, but if I feel like my employer, they were mean to me and now I'm going to sue them type of insurance. It's wrongful termination, it's, discrimination, it's those types of claims that, we are a very sue-happy society these days, and people are going on the internet and saying, oh, well, this happened over here and I'm going to try this with my employer. I think everyone, whether it's happened to you or not, you've heard of those horror stories. Sharing in that liability as a co-employer, we're actually providing, and the PEOs are providing, employment practices liability insurance, $1 million coverage, for instance, in some situations. And then we're also going to give you all the MIC expertise from a people component to say, here's what you should be doing proactively. Let's document. Let's make sure they're signing the handbook, they're following procedures. And then let's also proactively train them on what good looks like. And then you put your head in the pillow at night, peace of mind. You also have a policy that's going to support that because you're sharing in that liability. So that's what PEOs do. It's a way to say, hey, I don't want to have as much liability, or I want to have better buying power, or I don't know anything about HR. I don't really want to spend my time there because it's not the best use of my time. As you kind of go down that line, there are costs associated. But as Nick was pointing out, the total cost of ownership, what the ROI is for you, is really important of understanding your options and the different flavors that can impact and make your life a lot easier than maybe doing it in-house or doing it the way you've always done it. It's a shift in the approach to your business as it relates to HR transforming into human capital management. So HR used to be viewed, it was one of the first areas that got cut when everything started going south about 7, 8, 10 years ago, and it was viewed as a cost center for an organization. Now companies are saying, how can HR become a revenue generating operation for an organization? And that's where that human capital management piece comes in. It's understanding how we can make your C players or your 3-rated players 4 and 5 so they can better your organization and drive revenue from that standpoint. So I know I am standing between you and lunch. Any questions? Is that helpful? Is it different than you've heard about HR in the past, or most people probably don't think about HR, hopefully, because you haven't had the issues?
Let me jump in and just kind of talk a little bit about the experience that Lakeview has. So we've been working with ADP, and again, there's other companies out there. There used to be, at Lakeview, we're not that large that we have an HR department. And like they were saying, the HR departments have changed. It's not, okay, let's organize a Christmas party, and okay, we've got these benefits that are available. There's a lot more to it. I don't have to worry about all of that anymore as an employer, because I trust them. They're doing it all for me. All the ECA clients, all the new employee tracking, of their onboarding, things like that. There's ways of setting up that the employees can actually call and talk to and ask about their benefits. Help me. This insurance company isn't doing this for me. I need some help. They're there. You've got a call center, it helps them. I don't have to do that anymore, which makes my life a lot easier. I know many of us wear lots of hats, and in our organizations, that's one hat that has reduced in my head. There still is a component that I deal with them and with the employees, but it's made life a lot easier for me and Lakeview. When we made the decision, it was a whole business decision. The CFO was involved, operations was involved, the CEO was involved, so it was a collective decision. So, because it does affect all those components. So, questions?
Just a point on just as a microcosm of what you do is 12 being touched with trustee in my real life, I have my health insurance, I own my health insurance agency, and COBRA is one of those elements, and so every company I've ever dealt with that was COBRA eligible, meaning more than 20 employees, it sounds simple, you leave your job, you get an option to continue, and you do that, but what happened, there are so many nuances, the way that you have to notify, when you have to notify, and if you read the case law, people got caught getting tricked into making a mistake which cost them huge money. I tell every one of them, even if you've got an HR department and you think you won't know how to follow the COBRA law, don't do it. Give it to somebody else. And again, that's a
Great
microcosm
point.
of all the late things
Yeah.
that come along with that. Because I tell you, I mean, at our township, our fiscal officer said, oh, I can take care of that COBRA stuff. No, you can't.
There's a huge liability on them.
Yeah.
And-
Turn it over to them.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be.
We've had-
like that.
We've had our handful of terminations in recent months and years, and basically, all I have to do is put the information into the website, and boom, 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 these letters are sent, and communication is done with the employee that has left. I don't have to worry about it.
I would say that's just one little thing, because again, you look
Right.
at the, you think it's just a real simple thing, but boy, it can become so.
And you do a bunch of those little things, and you think you can do them yourself, and all of a sudden, what you're supposed to be
You
doing is
missed that
driving.
6 or 7, and guess
Yep.
what? All of a sudden, that person doesn't have insurance, had a $200,000 claim, and the insurance company said, well, now I've got, and so maybe you're stuck with that, so it's,
Yep.
So it's a big decision, obviously, there is some cost involved, but looking at it in the long run, I think it's a benefit.